When it comes down to photography or videography, lighting is everything. And you're most likely to overlook lighting equipment when starting out or building your photography kit. And I need to confess, I did exactly the same. I ignored continuous lighting for my portrait studio work. But this has changed as GVM reached out to me to ask me if I would like to try their SD200D. A 200 watt bi-color cop light, and I need to confess it was quite a blast to use. And let me tell you, 200 watts of power is quite bright, so you probably will never run out of light when shooting in your studio. Not only do you got the benefit when using continuous lighting in a studio that you see the light straight falling on your subject. It is pretty much like working with a mirrorless camera. What you see is what you get. But having the option of a bi-color version as well, where you can adjust the Kelvin between 3200 up to 5600, gives you great flexibility, and you could fake some sunlight or similar things within your photograph. But also having a 200 watt bi-color cop light, which is adjustable or be controlled by your smartphone, is quite handy, because you just can put it up, leave it there, forget about it, and do all sort of controlling for the light via smartphone. Not only is the SD200D fairly light for its size, but it also is fitted with a bones mount, which gives you great flexibility when it comes down to soft boxes, adapters, strip boxes, or any sort of light modifiers, because bones mount is widely spread. Unfortunately, one of the biggest downsides of continuous lighting is heat. And there's no way around. Continuous lighting will create heat at some point, but with this double-sided fan, I need to say I did run this light several hours on full power, and the light itself barely gave any heat away, so that was a very nice surprise. Let me give you 5 tips how you can get the most out of a continuous lighting when shooting in a studio. Tip number 1 is control your ambient light. Continuous lighting usually is weaker than a flash or a strobe because they don't give you a quick power outburst of light. So you need to control your ambient light when using continuous lighting. Shut your curtains, switch off lights, control your ambient light as much as possible to get as much out of your continuous lighting as possible. Tip number 2 is set your white balance. Either set your white balance to Kelvin, matching the Kelvin on your continuous light, or set it to flush white balance. This will give you the most consistency when it comes down to your white balance throughout the shoot. Tip number 3 is your aperture. When shooting continuous light in a studio, you need to rethink your approach when it comes down to the aperture. Because with a flash, as we said beforehand, you got a fast, quick power outburst, and you're being able to shoot a f8, f11, or even f14 if it needs to be. But with continuous lighting, you actually want to do the opposite way, and you might want to open your aperture further up at f4, f2.8, f2, or even f1.8 to gather as much light into the sensor as well. Tip number 4 would be your ISO, and your ISO works a bit like your aperture in this case, and you might need to consider to bump up your ISO a bit to gather more light into the sensor. Sometimes you need to set your ISO to ISO 400, 640, 800, 1000 or even 1600. With the SD200D I was able to shoot a f5 ISO 800 and had the shutter speed between 1/200th of a second up to 1/320th of a second. I could lower the shutter speed a bit further, close the aperture down, and still use the ISO of 800. So keep in mind, when using continuous lighting in a studio, you might need to bump up your ISO a bit, so don't be scared to do so. And the last tip would be the distance of your light towards your subject. As further your light is away from your subject or from your model, as harsher your light will be, and as closer you bring a light towards your model or subject, as softer the light will be. And then you adjust your brightness of your light accordingly to the subject you're shooting. And with that said, I hope you liked this video today, guys, and it gave you a bit of an insight how you can use continuous lighting in a studio as well. And continuous lighting doesn't need to be expensive either. Good quality light doesn't need to break a bank, but you definitely should consider, when building your photography kit, to consider continuous lighting as well. It gives you the option to use it for photo and video at the same time, And even though I had plenty of lights hanging around, I did ignore for way too long continuous lighting in my portrait or photography. So don't do the same mistake, consider lighting as well, even though if it's a boring subject to buy, to shop for, it's way more fun buying any sort of fast prime lenses, f1.8, 85mm. Don't let the light fall behind. Lighting is everything. And with that said, I'm gonna see you next time, my friend. Take care.